Okay, so given what an effective vote-winning strategy it inevitably was in 2010, do you regret the promise that you made on tuition fees, and do you feel that it is going to hurt you potentially in the election in 2015?
Yes and yes. Of course, like any other human being, you want to do what you want to do. When you can't do it, you regret that you can't. And I mean, the truth is, it's the fairest deal that I could get in the circumstances. For you know the history. Fees were introduced by Labour, increased by Labour. They've chosen to forget that these days, but the Conservatives wanted to see them go up. So it's the fairest deal I could get, but I have apologised musically, no less, for not being able to obviously do. Well, of course I can't. We didn't win the election, so I can't.
Yeah,
I've got no. But of course I regret. And yes, of course. Listen, I'm not daft. There are plenty of people who will say, oh, for that reason, they're not going to vote Lib Dem. So I think yes and yes.
Yeah. Do you feel that it's been somewhat undersold as a policy? Because I feel the actual system now feels more like a graduate tax than the old system is. And I was always a believer that the graduate tax is actually a fair system. Do you feel you have undersold it in a way?
To put it very mildly, if we'd called it what it is in effect. I think the Institute of Fiscal Studies even published a report saying it's one of the most progressive forms of repayment, kind of anywhere.
But that's not the way it's been perceived.
No, of course it's not. And it's not what it's called. You're quite right. If you called it what it is in effect, which is a graduate tax, I suspect a lot of would save me a lot of heartache. But listen, there's no point me trying to rerun the past. We are where we are. But you're right. The actual system, the reality, is of course quite different to the allegation, and certainly to the predictions made at the time. And you'll remember at the time, people were saying, "Oh, no one will go to university, no one will go to university from disadvantaged backgrounds." Actually, now we've got more youngsters on full-time courses than ever before. And actually, the really good news, I mean, just forget me, forget the politics, and forget an election. It is very, very good news that we've now got more disadvantaged kids, despite all the predictions, going to university than ever before, and more kids from black minority ethnic backgrounds going than ever before. I think the reason for that is because, I mean, you'll know this better than I do, what you repay 10 years, 15 years, 20 years' time is actually in many ways less important than the upfront support that you give to people, particularly from lower income groups. And of course the maintenance grants for those individuals have gone up, and the upfront payment of fees, which used to exist under the Labour fee system, has gone. But look, so it's a good thing, more people in university, but I'm not in any way. But
you do feel it has been slightly undersold in a way that I feel actually.
Well, undersold, I think, is again understandable. But it's been, and listen, I and everybody involved, I strongly believe, and I've never ducked responsibility for things. But I think I am entitled to say to people, look, we said at the time, whatever the controversy was, that this wouldn't discourage people from going to university. It hasn't done so, and that at the end of the day is the most important thing of all.
Okay, and so in 2015, looking forward, not looking back now, what do the Liberal Democrats offer students now that we've moved on from tuition fees and lots of other policies? Traditionally, Liberal Democrats always popular with students. What are you trying to offer specifically in 2015?
Well, I mean, actually, I don't think it is about individual policies, and I don't actually think last time it's about. I don't think you should vote for a party as if you're going into a supermarket and you just like one, like the look of one, one product.
Yeah.
You should vote for political parties depending on your values. What's your overall sense about what kind of society we should live in? And that actually, despite all the furore about this policy or that policy, hasn't changed. My party stands for, always will do, always has done, for a liberal view of politics, and a kind of liberal view of what a good, self-confident liberal Britain can look like. What does that mean? I think, above and beyond anything else, it means that a liberal Britain is one of opportunity, so that you don't, no one is prejudged by the circumstances of their birth. So that's why you've got these signature tune policies that we have implemented, notwithstanding the furore about the one policy we couldn't. Actually, there are many more that we have that will make a massive difference in building a liberal Britain, taking lots of people on low pay out of paying income tax, by raising the point which you start being a massive expansion of apprenticeships on a scale never seen before in this post-war period. Huge investment, billions of pounds of money into early years and childcare and preschool support to give kids, particularly from the most disadvantaged backgrounds. The pupil premium, something I first wrote about close to 12, 13 years ago, now happening in schools, closing the gap between the educational performance at school, between, anyway, etc., etc. If you believe in that kind of country, where, you know, as much as possible, governments try and clear the way so that people can have the fairest crack of the whip, the kind of life they want, then I genuinely think that's what you get from the... You're not going to get it from the Conservatives. I mean, I've seen it for myself, governing with them for 5 years. Their inclination is always to look after their own kind. I mean, look at this announcement today. I don't know whether this is going out, but today this idea about basically taking benefits away from young people and making them do a whole bunch of other things. You know, instead, it's a classic example of the Conservatives being very tough on the young and the weak, and very soft, actually, on the rich and the powerful. Labour, in my view, they can't guarantee that kind of opportunity that you want, because they keep spending all the money and or misspending it. So look, if you believe in a kind of liberal society of opportunity, regardless of the circumstances of your birth, that is above and beyond above else what we believe in.
Okay, and I think you were hinting at it there. I mean, I in 2010, I wasn't quite old enough to vote, but I was pretty close, and I signed up for the Lib Dem youth mail thing. And since then, I've got the emails and got a sort of the promo coming from the Liberal Democrat youth part. And I think there was an email that was signed by you. I think it was signed, you know, kind regards Nick type thing, where you gave a quote about, you seem to be positioning yourself in between Labour and the Tories. You know, sort of, the Tories haven't got the social responsibility inbuilt in their parties, we have to restrain them. Labour have not got the financial responsibility, we have to restrain them. Is for you liberalism and the Liberal Democrats simply about defending the middle ground and splitting the difference between them? Or is liberalism an ideology in itself?
Of course it's an ideology in itself, of course it is. And in a nutshell, I think, in the way that conservatism, as the name implies, is about basically preserving the pecking order as it is. And left socialism, at least in its origins, was all about telling people what was good for them from the centre, sort of dispensing progress by way of the state. Liberalism, right back to the days of Gladstone, has always distinguished itself, British liberalism, by having a very, very optimistic belief that the individual should be cherished and protected. Yeah. And so that's, by the way, why we obsess so much more about civil liberties and privacy than Labour Conservative politicians do, because we think
Snoopers Charter and stuff like that.
We think it's ideologically right to say that there should be a limit to the amount of information the state holds about you. They don't understand that. I see it in Parliament. They just don't understand why I get so agitated about the so-called Snoopers Charter, because it's an issue of principle that if your philosophy is about giving every individual... Mental health is another good example. The first thing I ever raised at Prime Minister's Questions 7 years ago when I was leader of the Liberal Democrats, Gordon Brown was leader, was about mental health. I'll never forget the kind of slightly quizzical look I got across the House of Commons. No one had raised it before like that. It's been something I've been remorselessly going on about ever since. We're starting, I can only stress, we have all the solutions, starting to shift the dial on the underinvestment in mental health over a long period of time. But again, it's very liberal that. It's very liberal, the belief that someone who is feeling isolated and vulnerable, dealing with these huge difficulties, mental health conditions, and being rather isolated, that you need to take that out of the shadows, lift the taboo, put that on an equal footing, give them as much chance to get ahead as someone who has a physical health problem. Those are very liberal things. Now, there's lots of, as I say, there are lots of individual policies I'll give you a long list, a list as long as my arm, of policies we both delivered and want to deliver. But actually, I want people to vote for us because they share our values, and they share, not that they kind of say, oh, I'm going to pick and choose, as if you're sort of choosing sweets from some individual kind of sweet, from a sweet shop. That's not what politics should be about. It should be about what your overall vision is of society, and mine has always remained and always will remain a liberal one.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, the reason why I raised the sort of the splitting the difference between the two parties is that There's been a few interviews with you recently, I think it was a few months ago now, where it was reported that you'd like another go at being Deputy Prime Minister. You feel that the Liberal Democrats can be a party of government.
Oh.
And the fact that you did that interview and you seem to suggest that you feel the Liberal Democrats can now be a natural party of government seems to imply that whichever one is the bigger party, whichever we get Labour or the Tories are the bigger party, you're simply going to be the leash, vote for the leash.
Oh, I see. Well, I think the way I phrased it, I think I know what you're referring to, is I said that, because of course I'm constantly asked by journalists, how do you compare to the other parties or the rest of it? And I think I just sort of glibly said, but I think it summarises the relative positions of the parties. I said, well, in the same way that we're sort of giving heart to a government with the Conservatives that certainly wouldn't be there if they were on their own. If the Liberal Democrats were ever in government with Labour, I suspect we'd give sort of backbone, certainly on balancing the books and making sure that we don't, bankrupt the economy. So as I said, there was a heart backbone, heart spine thing. But it's not. I'm not saying that because sort of we're gagging to be in government at all costs. I'm just being realistic that much though I'd like it to be otherwise, I don't think I'm going to be Prime Minister after May the 7th. But secondly, I think people are entitled to say that if there were another coalition government, not my decision, not Ed Miliband's, not David Cameron's, it's the British people, they kind of want to know what our overall stance is. And our stance is not coalition at all costs, of course not. Of course not. But if we think we can do the right thing in line with our values and the right thing for the country, I suspect that's the kind of role we would certainly play, given the failings, from my perspective, the failings of the other two parties, where the Conservatives are very socially regressive and Labour seem rather timid on basic economics.
Yeah. So you speak about coalition as something that, as a basic question on coalition, do you think that it's good for British democracy? Do you think coalitions are something, because obviously with first past the post, coalitions are a rarity.
I think they're going to happen more. I think they're going to happen more.
I agree that I think they'll happen more. Do you think that they are a good thing? And if they are a good thing, surely we need a more proportional voting system. Is your party still behind a more proportional voting system? You think coalition, you feel it's a way of governing that does work, even in the Westminster system? You feel it's effective?
So, yes, I very much do. And again, the almost hysterical scepticism that greeted the creation of the coalition back in 2010. I mean, you should go back and have a look at the clippings. I lost count of the advice I was portentously given on the pages of.
I remember
every single week. It was it'll fail by next Tuesday, it'll fail by next spring, it'll fail by next autumn. And I kept patiently saying, no, it won't. We'll see it through for 5 years, and we have. And of course, what we've done in doing so is just dispel this myth that has been sustained by the two big vested interests, the red team and the blue team, the Conservative and the Labour Party, that they have some God-given right to play pass the parcel with the governance of our country. So this is, by the way, why the Liberal Democrats have been, why we've been subject to so much vilification from right and left, from the sort of Daily Mirror and the Daily Mail, in equal measure, if from opposing ends, because we threaten, or the fact of coalition threatens their cosy stitch-up. Of course it is, it's a duopoly, exactly. Like in business, like in politics, if you threaten a duopoly, it can get pretty nasty.
Yeah.
So of course they have. It'll happen again, though, and I think Labour and the Conservative parties have got a much bigger dilemma than we do, because we're quite open about the fact that we might be in coalition again.
So you'd say it'll happen again? You think?
I'm.
You mean again in terms of a long term? There will be a time where we have.
I can't predict to you what the outcome of May the 7th is. What I can predict to you, I think, pretty safely, is coalitions will have to happen again, because the days of tribal class-based politics, where everyone voted either blue team or red team, because that's what their mum did and their dad did and their grandparents, and that's what people did on their street, that's gone. People have become much more choosy. It's much more volatile. And in that sense, it's really good. You've got much more choice. And I'm an old-fashioned liberal believes in choice in a democracy. So I think there will be more coalition. I think we've shown that it works. Not only have we shown that it works, we've shown that it works in exceptionally, almost uniquely difficult circumstances. To create a novel kind of government that has to do probably the worst kind of clean-up job that any government's had to do certainly since the oil crash in the early 1970s. I like to think the history books will judge us pretty kindly, because that was whoever was in power was going to have to do some monstrously difficult things, and frankly some very unpopular things as well, given that we were sort of teetering on the edge of a cliff back in 2010. So I think the fact we've held it together politically, but also delivered a growing economy, Yeah, I'm really proud of that, actually.
And speaking of the growing economy, I mean, last year growth was, what, about 3% or something like that, annualised growth of GDP was about 3%. Do you feel that the Liberal Democrats are getting their fair share of the credit?
No, of course not.
Of course not.
No, of course not. No, of course not. But as I said earlier, if what you've got, which we do, and I don't say this sort of chippily or churlishly, it's just a fact, which has been. If you've got these huge vested interests on right and left, so you've got the Tory party, you've got all the sort of big money backers they've got, and the big vested interest in the press, and you've got the Labour Party with all the trade union money, and they're both piling in for the reasons I explained earlier, trying to vilify or elbow out of the picture, of course, because they want to, exactly, they both have an interest in resuming what they think is business as usual. So that's why you get this almost comical sight of the Conservative Party, for instance, now charging around the country, claiming credit for policies that I personally know would never have happened in a month of Sundays if we hadn't been in government. The classic example is the tax rise. I sat in meetings with David Cameron and George Osborne, Danny Alexander and I did, budget after budget after budget, with Osborne saying to me, this is your tax cut. If you want your tax cut, you have to do X, Y, Z in return. And now, apparently, it was their idea all along. Now, of course, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but it's just an illustration, if you like, of what I think is unsurprising, but nonetheless striking, which is that the Conservative Party in particular is now trying to airbrush out the fact that they didn't win the election, airbrush out the fact they couldn't have governed on their own, and are now trying to even airbrush out who brought... I mean, the tax thing, I mean, look back on the leaders' debates in 2010, I remember saying to Gordon Brown and David Cameron, I said, well, we should take people out of tax by raising the point at which you start. And I remember David Cameron saying, words to the effect of, well, it's not possible, you can't do it, it's not affordable. So anyway... And
now you're both signed up to moving into 12.5. Yeah. And speaking of that, I mean, speaking of airbrushing things, I suppose, the electoral register, the way that we register to vote, particularly for students, a big issue for students, has changed. The way that we register has changed. 200,000 less young people aged 18 to 25 are registered compared to a year ago. Young people are less likely to vote for the governing parties, for the Liberal Democrats and Conservatives, compared to they are for Labour and the Green Party. Is it just a coincidence that we have many less young people registered to vote this time? I mean, your minister, your special responsibility for constitutional affairs. I just wonder what the reasoning is behind it.
Let me set the record straight on some of this, because I think it's been some serious bills talked about this. Firstly, let's remember which government and which party decided to introduce individual voter registration. It was the Labour Party, it was the Labour government, and they were right to do so. And I'll explain to you what... And so all we're doing is we're just delivering, putting into practice, a decision that the previous Labour government took. Why were they right? The previous way of registering onto the electoral register was deeply patronising, sort of Edwardian, because it was based on this concept of a head of household, this sort of paternalistic view that there's some sort of, portly gentleman who comes to the front door and says, with some regal sweep of the hand, well, I'll register all the young people in the house. It's a basic liberal principle, surely, which I suspect most young people actually agree with, that they have the right, every individual should have the right to register themselves. Now, so that's what we're doing. We're doing it because that's what the previous Labour government decided. We're doing it because the old system was truly Edwardian and patronising. What we now need to do is make sure that as many students and young people, where they're not registered, know that it takes 2 or 3 minutes, a few clicks on your laptop or your whatever, your handheld device, and you get registered. And that's why, by the way, we're giving a bunch of money to the National Union of Students, millions of pounds going to electoral registration officers. I have no desire, other than the fact, to see the maximum number of people both registered and then voting. But what we can't have, surely, is for fear of change. I don't think it would have been justifiable. In fact, all parties used to say this. The Labour Party now changed their tune. All parties used to accept that the old paper-based, sort of top-down, head of household way of registering votes was patronising, wrong, and was disempowering.
Yeah, no, agreed. So we have some people are registered to vote, luckily. That's good. My personal view, I think there could have been more publicity about the system changing. I mean, I was aware that the system was changed, but I wasn't aware that it was such a big change that everyone had to register. Certainly my housemates weren't, but hopefully I mean, there's been stuff going around, big vans saying register to vote, hopefully that will work, and we are starting to get registered. 65% of students at the University of Sheffield are registered to vote.
Yes.
I know at the moment. I know also that the Green Party has been popular around here. The Green Surge has been a big thing. Do you think that you're threatened? Do you feel threatened by the Green Surge? Do you think there's some interesting things to say? Do you agree with any of the points that they have to say about the state of politics as it is? You know, coming from that anti-establishment position that you sort of almost occupied in 2010.
Yeah, no, listen, my persistent sort of anti-establishment kind of instinct. Of course, I like to see anyone who kind of challenges the status quo, because oddly enough, the longer I've been in government, the more anti-establishment I've become. I mean, I tried my bit to change it, everything from a smidgen of democracy in the House of Lords, no, they blocked that, to change the electoral system, you talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
Just deeply cynical, clubbing together of Labour and Conservatives to block that. Party funding reform. So, you know, I've got the T-shirt of trying, but admittedly not always succeeding in changing politics. Anyone who wants to kind of join the barricades, great. I so happen to think that, attractive though it might seem, some of the kind of propositions from the Greens, verge on the kind of populist. You know, this kind of declaration that you can somehow sort of, rid the world of global capitalism, and particularly where they've got into power, frankly, I mean, look in Brighton, I mean, the recycling rates are now some of the lowest in the whole country. But they've got garbage piling up on the streets. So what I'm saying is, do I understand any person's, whether they're young or old, instinct to want to kind of, give the established order a kicking? Yes, I actually feel it myself very strongly. Do I think the Green Party, or indeed that kind of populism, kind of works? Well, no, I don't think it does, but one needs to make up their own mind.
And do you feel there's one issue that you feel you can fight the Greens? What about the environmental credentials? I mean, this government was so big on the greenest government ever. Yeah, some more contracts going out to fossil fuel.
I think we've done a lot better than people give us credit for. I mean, look, that's just life. But I think if you actually step back and look at the unprecedented investment in green renewable energy, the biggest investment in offshore wind, for instance, than almost any other developed economy in the world's first green investment bank.
But then stuff like fracking that is really turning people off. What you said about the green rhetoric, it just feels empty when there's such when it's going on. You look at the rest of Europe and Germany and France, nuclear power and renewable energy, and then in Britain we're just pushing for fracking. It just feels regressive.
Well, you think the sort of French reliance on nuclear is more environmentally sensible? Well, I mean, this is a much wider debate. I really think for anyone who cares about the environment and also cares about people being able to pay their bills, what we have to do as a country is wean ourselves off an over-reliance on fossil fuel imports from volatile parts of the world. Do I think fracking is the answer? The answer, of course it isn't. Okay. Do I believe in sort of imposing a fatwa entirely on a whole new technology? That seems to me like a kind of quite a, why let the pendulum swing that way? It may play a role, if it can be done safely, in having a diverse way of generating energy, which is more environmentally sustainable. And actually, if you look at all the studies, the Climate Change Committee have said actually the approach we're taking, which is spreading our bets, investing more in renewable energy, allowing in very, very controlled circumstances, maybe some exploratory fracking to take place, is consistent with meeting our international climate change obligations. Doing what other countries have done, which is over-relying on one, often quite unstable form of producing energy, not good for the environment, not good for the economy either.
And then, 10 seconds, last question. Are you confident of retaining your seat in Sheffield Hallam?
Yes,
you're still going to be in the House of Commons May the 8th?
Yes, I am confident. I'm not complacent. And by the way, and nor should anyone be. I mean, campaigns are contests. They shouldn't be coronations.
Yes.
But look, I've served this constituency for 10 years. I've whatever people think about me, I've been a very, very dutiful constituency MP. Helped thousands and thousands of people over the years, and I think even my fiercest critics will accept that I spend a lot of time in the community, knocking on doors, as I will be doing just shortly. And I very much hope I will carry on being MP, of course.
Okay, Nick Clegg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.